Welcome to another episode of Full Build Friday, where I try to build a character from a comic, game, or similar source using the baseline rules of Pathfinder Second Edition and the Path Builder app. For this week's build, we wade into battle to create a build for Bellona, the goddess of war from Smite. But, before we go marching off, we need to establish a battle plan with some build goals. As previously described, Bellona is the Roman goddess of war, who is known not for having temples, but being found upon the battlefield at the side and front of the soldiers who worshipped her. She traditionally fights with her greatsword, but switches her weapons around depending on her last ability that she used. Her passive is Master of War, which grants her movement speed and protections whenever she deals or receives damage. Shield Bash sees her equip her shield along with her sword as she dashes forward, smacking and slowing enemies in a cone, while granting her a stack of block, which prevents damage from the next attack that hits her. She gains further stacks of block by making successful attacks. She switches to her Warhammer with Bludgeon, which causes her to spin around with her hammer before she brings it in a smashing slam. Her Warhammer cleaves in an arc with each of her basic attacks. Scourge has her draw her Bladed Whip, striking in a line that disarms enemies, which means they cannot attack for a brief period. Her Scourge also heals her with every third attack that she makes while using it. Finally, Eagle's Rally doesn't equip her with any new weapons, but does cause her to leap a great distance, slamming down a flag that inspires nearby allies, increasing their protections and power. Furthermore, enemies hit by the flag are damaged and stunned for a brief duration. With our goals established, pick your weapon, and let's head into battle. We'll start as we always do with the A of Ancestry, this time selecting Hobgoblin. This particular option is based on the heavy association with war and battle prominent in the Ancestry and seen in its feats. But we're going to use the Gonzi heritage to represent a bit of that divine, though mechanically there's only a single specific Ancestry feat that I'm looking for from this. Cantorian Reinforcement comes from the Hobgoblin, and is probably the best option for her Ancestry feat to start out, simply making her a bit sturdier, as we don't really see those more militant options yet. Befitting her business as a being of battle, her background is Martial Disciple. She uses this to become trained in athletics, which will net her quick jump, a nice start towards the great leap she makes as part of Eagle's Rally. She also, very importantly, becomes trained in warfare lore, which seems like a necessity for a goddess who presides over such a domain. The remaster didn't change much about the fighter, but it did add a feat that really brought this build online and inspired me to finally put it together. We aren't quite at the level to take it yet, so Bellona will start with Vicious Swing as her fighter feat to let her land heavy blows, as seen with the damage she doles out when using her abilities. For her skills, she'll be trained in Acrobatics, Diplomacy, Religion, Society, and Survival. She's going to take Strength as her main ability score, given her preference for melee combat, and has a secondary focus on Constitution, since this will require her to be in the thick of it.
Into the thick of it!
She also needs some charisma because Bellona is a leader of soldiers, though we won't start seeing those increases until at least level 5. Before we get any deeper into this build, we need to discuss the war elephant in the room. Bellona wields a variety of weapons, and while there are some more ways to support that now, the main issue still lies in keeping these weapons runed up and ready to rock. With that in mind, we're going to look at a few different options you could go for. Now her main weapon will be a Bastard Sword, since she can swap between one-handed or two-handed for it, depending on whether if she's wielding her shield or not. The most effective option would likely be to simply eventually get a shifting rune on her weapon, but another thing you could do here is have her wield a spiked gauntlet in her offhand, that she keeps at top tier weapon runes, and then use doubling rings to go along with it to share those runes with her other weapons as she draws them. Alternatively, a game that simply uses automatic bonus progression won't have to worry about this and can use her weapons as she wants. Now aside from the Bastard Sword, I'd take an Earthbreaker or Maul for her hammer, with the former also having the option between being one-handed or two-handed. And then a Scorpion Whip for her Scourge, which happens to come with the Disarm trait, matching the effect of this ability. For the first build in a few, we will not be taking a dedication at 2nd level, and will instead take Lightning Swap from her fighter feats, the aforementioned new option that convinced me to try this build. This allows her to sheath a weapon and draw a new one as a single action. It even lets her bring out a shield as part of that swap, which is a massive save on action economy, and with the shield block feat granted by her class, she can already generate the block effects of her Shield Bash ability. Her skill feat may be a little redundant, but she takes additional lore for warfare lore, simply so that she doesn't have to spend skill increases on her lore while still eventually making her a legend in it. Now the fighter is a little lacking in mobility options, so she takes Fleet at 3rd level as a minor means of generating the additional movement speed that she gains from her Master of War passive. Disarm uses the Athletic skill, which leads to her applying her first skill increase there to become an expert in it. With her use of weapons that have the two-handed trait and switching between her various armaments, Bellona takes dual-handed assault as her 4th level class feat, letting her spend a single action to lay a smackdown with a small extra bonus based on this trait. It then lets her return to one-handing the weapon, which has some possibilities that she can get some fun use out of. Given the sheer amount of weapons that she is lugging around, she'll take Hefty Hauler as her skill feat, helping her out when it comes to balancing out this bulk. At 5th level, Bellona and Cheese gains the Recognize Ambush Ancestry feat, which will let her draw a weapon as a free action when she rolls initiative, letting her get geared up early. This skill increase will make her an expert in acrobatics, but she also gains the Fighter Weapon Mastery feature. Given that she uses a sword for her baseline, and even after using Shield Bash, she'll become a master with swords first. She finally takes up an archetype at 6th level, taking the Martial Dedication. This will make her an expert in diplomacy and will work towards the empowering effects of her Eagle's Rally ability, as it bolsters herself and her allies. She uses Titan Wrestler for her skill feat, reflecting the idea that characters from myths and legends are oft times larger than life, and she pits herself against them. Bellona fights on the front lines, and to that end she takes up Toughness as her 7th level general feat, to acquire some more hit points. In what might be a bit of surprise, she'll actually increase her diplomacy to master, since her charisma is a tad lower, and this will help with her next level's class feat. Speaking of which, she takes up Inspiring Martial Stance at 8th level, so that she can actually start providing that benefit to her allies. While the actual effect of her ability increases the power of her allies, I prefer this over Dread Martial Stance, as I personally think the increase to attack is simply more beneficial. She picks up Battle Planner as her skill feat to gain further use out of her now master proficiency in warfare lore. At 9th level, we find the entire reason I took the Gonzi heritage. Bellona gains Glory and Valor, which, while being limited to a single use per day, causes her strikes to heal her. This is limited in its functionality, but it is the closest way I can imagine getting to the healing effects of her Scourge. Then, as a fighter, she gains combat flexibility at this level, which she can alter on a daily basis. Personally, I like quick shield block for this option so that she can use more blocks or mix up a block and reactive strike. She returns to the athletic skill to become a master in it through this level's skill increase. For her 10th level class feat, Lebanon Bellona takes Slam Down, a strike that includes a trip, which is a fantastic feature for a fighter. This is also probably the best way to simulate the stun in her Eagle's Rally, as the condition is normally difficult for martial type characters to inflict. As for her skill feat, she uses Rapid Mantle, since her athletics bonus should be consistently higher than her reflex bonus. Fast Recovery fills in as her general feat at 11th level, though many of its effects are already provided by her Cantorian reinforcement, which could be a reason to take Die Hard instead. She's going to branch out with her skills again, this time taking an increase to Religion to become an expert in it. A return to the martial archetype grants her Steel Yourself, letting her bolster allies with temporary hit points and a bonus to their Fortitude save. This is meant to resemble the increased protections provided by her Eagle's Rally, though back-to-back is another option that could work for this concept, depending on your preference. Her skill feat will be Powerful Leap, which also plays into Eagle's Rally with the jump she makes before slamming her flag down. She further explores protective options with Pride in Arms at 13th level as her Ancestry feat, which is another reaction that might compete with those such as Shield Block or Reactive Strike. But, if she doesn't have an enemy seeking to engage her, this is a good backup to bolster an ally, like I said. Then she becomes a legend when using a sword and a master at religion, referencing her own divine might. Building out of her Slam Down at 14th level is Crashing Slam, which reduces the number of rolls she needs to make when using Slam Down, and nets her some additional damage on it. This probably isn't super necessary, but like I said earlier, knocking people prone is great for the fighter since they have Reactive Strike, ready to take advantage of a creature standing up. Her skill feat will be Sacred Defense, letting her grant herself some temporary HP, using her power as a god. 15th level allows her to take Die Hard as her general feat. This martial master mixes it up in melee, and might need some insurance if things get bad. At this point she also gains improved flexibility, which can be spent on the likes of Disarming Twist to aid her in resembling her Scourge ability. This skill increase also sees her become a legend in athletics. Swipe serves as a stalwart soldier's 16th level class feat, allowing her to strike a multitude of targets with a single blow, as per the passive effect of her Warhammer while it is equipped. Then, this level's skill feat will be Cloud Jump, letting her spring impossible distances to land with her Eagle's Rally. Hobgoblin continues to prove an excellent choice for this build as Rallying Cry comes in at 17th level for her Ancestry feat. This provides temporary HP, much like her Steal Yourself, but also causes her allies to become quickened for a minute, which is a massive buff even if this action is limited to once per day. She does still want to use her Inspiring Martial stance, so her skill increase at this level goes to Diplomacy to make her a legend in it. Whereas Swipe covers the basic attacks of Bellona's Warhammer, she takes Whirlwind Strike at 18th level to represent the activation of her Bludgeon ability. This ability starts with her spinning and clobbering foes nearby, which is perfectly represented by this feat. To ensure that soldiers come to her when looking for instructions on the waging of war, Legendary Professional is her skill feat, which seems an obvious choice for a god of war. A cinematic featuring Bellona demonstrated her very nonchalantly dodging and weaving through enemies, which Featherstep at least helps to visualize, the idea of her easily wandering out of range of attacks. This final skill increase applies to Acrobatics to make her a master in it. Now normally I would go Weapon Supremacy for Bellona's capstone feat, but with her habit of switching between weapons and adapting to different fighting styles, I kind of like Ultimate Flexibility. It feels like the way to go for this bravado brandishing Battleborn. This opens up a ton of options, though I added in Savage Critical for my example, since at this point she is a legend with all of her weapons. She has Battle Prayer as a solid option for her skill feat, letting her make use of the divine domination she has over her dire domain. With that skill feat selected, it is time to turn our attention to use of this build in a free archetype game. Obviously, she can start picking up her martial archetype sooner, and maybe slip in some feats such as the Cadence Call options, or whatever you didn't pick between Steal Yourself and Back to Back. Beyond that though, she probably benefits the most from looking into a combat-oriented archetype and picking up its feats, though she could likely get some use out of Bastion as well. With our Divine Dagwood scaling towards the ceiling, let's go over the ingredients on our Bellona sandwich. Bellona is a Gonzi Hobgoblin fighter with the Martial Disciple background, serving to reflect her role as a deity of war. Her passive, Master of War, is slightly underrepresented, with Fleet giving her increased speed, and a two-hand trait of her Bastard Sword representing the greatsword that she commonly wields. As a fighter, she automatically has shield block for the block function of her Shield Bash, and can switch to using her Bastard Sword in a single hand while holding onto her shield. She can use her combat flexibility as a fighter to further gain quick shield block, representing the stacks of blocks that she can generate with her attacks. She can use Lightning Swap to switch out her weapons, and take up her Bludgeon with a Whirlwind Strike, and then using Swipe for its basic attacks. She can use a Scorpion Whip for her Scourge, which comes with the Disarm trait, that she can further elevate with Twisting Disarm, thanks to her improved flexibility. For the actual healing that she gains from it, she relies upon her Gonzi heritage and takes Glory and Valor. This heals her on the first strike rather than every third, but this ability is otherwise difficult to represent, and this is the best way to do so. Finally, she can leap into the fight with Quick Jump and Cloud Jump, resembling the massive leap of her Eagle's Rally, while Slam Down is the stun effect that is imparted by her landing on an enemy. As for the buffs that it provides to her allies, she takes the Martial Dedication with the Inspiring Martial stance, while the protections come from Steal Yourself or her Rallying Cry. This willful warrior wields a wide wall of weaponry with which to whack wicked wildcats, wasting the worst in her waging of wars. The fighter might seem a bit simple, but it certainly can make for some fun builds. If you would like to check out a breakdown for the build that includes item suggestions and a fuller exploration of its use in a free archetype game, consider checking out the blog. That, along with the Monster Monday Twitter and Discord, are linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic Friday.